Oh, you're from Torah? I'm undercover. Alright. So I guess he'll play. Thank you guys. They like
Good evening, gentlemen. Thank you for coming out tonight. Baruch Hashem, we have a beautiful turnout tonight. I'd like to start with a beracha. I'd like to welcome all guests. You're no longer guests after the first time. So let's get comfortable, and Bezat Hashem we can grow together. Kedarkenu b'kodesh, here we go. Baruch Ata Adonai Eloheinu Melech Ha'olam Shehakol Nihiya Bidvaro. I'm hoping that you guys remember, we mentioned this sometimes in the past. Tuesday nights, we do a little bit more of the style of a shmooze on the parsha. Whereas Thursday nights, it's a little bit more of a shi'ur on the parasha. So tonight's the shmooze. And I want to open up with an idea. And I want you guys to think about this, because it's extremely prevalent to the times. Not just on a political level, but on a social level. And I believe, and I'm hoping, that if tonight's words are taken properly, and Borei Olam, I'm asking already in advance, help me on a very sensitive and delicate topic that we're going to hit on tonight. But this could be life-changing. And it could also open up the mind and our life to a new style of living. Hashem should give us Yata Dishmaya. Bezat Hashem. I want to start with an idea. How do you slave a free person? Now, when I ask you that question, I'm asking particularly, how do you slave a free person without putting a gun to their head? You see, in the olden days when there were slave markets, and you'd simply walk up and be the highest bidder on the particular slave that was on the block, that's a no-brainer. You bought him. The way you bought anything, you bought cattle. You bought a slave. But those years are gone. Thanks to a tall man in a place called Gettysburg, those days are far and gone. How do you slave or enslave a free man without putting a gun to his head, but just the opposite? How do you slave a free man by his own will and consent? Now there's a question. Tonight I want to talk about this very point. Because tonight I'd like to hit upon democracy, freedom, and slavery of today. So here we go. We take a look. We saw in the parasha that Hashem tells Moshe Rabbeinu, I want you to go to Paro. I want you to tell Paro, the time has come. I heard the cries of the Jewish people. It's time to let my people go. Moshe Rabbeinu comes to Paro and he says, Paro, Hashem demands that you let his people go. So at first, Paro makes a joke. Who is Hashem? I haven't found him in the yellow pages of gods. He starts going through his book of all the different gods in the world. He says he's unlisted. Your God is unlisted. He doesn't exist. But after the whole joke, Moshe Rabbeinu says, Paro, you know exactly who Hashem is. Elokei Abraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, you know exactly who I'm talking about. And it's time to let the Jewish people go. Paro turns around and Paro says, not only am I not going to let them go, but now I realize that your people are actually thinking along the lines of freedom. The people are actually thinking that they're going to be freed from my slavery. If that's the case, tichbad ha'avoda al ha'anashim. It's time to add even more work. It's time to up the ante of the work. It's time to throw on them a heavier workload. Why? Ve'al yishvu b'divrei shaker. So like this, they won't get these false hopes in their minds. Or in simple terms, they won't have time to think. Listen to what Paro says, guys. Tichbad ha'avoda al hanashim. You guys, you have too much time on your hands. You're actually thinking about freedom? You're thinking about leaving my slavery? Oh no. Quickly, up the avodah. Till now, says Paro, we would give you the bricks. From this point on, no longer are we giving you the bricks. Now the Jewish people have to go out and make the bricks from scratch, make them on their own, and then still fill the impossible quota that they already had on them from before. Amazing. Listen to what Paro is saying. I'm going to take the workload that was already impossible, and I'm going to make it even more impossible, just so that you will not have a second to breathe. This is incredible. What exactly is he up to? How is that the answer? Moshe is telling him, God is telling Paro, let the people out. And Paro's answer is, I'm going to make the workload even heavier. How do you understand that? There's a tremendous secret here. Something big we're going to hit on tonight. And I'm hoping that this opens our eyes, not just to the days of slavery in Egypt, but to today, the days we're living in right now. I heard a beautiful mashal from a good friend of mine, Rabbi Shlomo Farchi. We grew up together many good years, very close friends, best friends. And I heard a beautiful mashal that I want to share with you. You know, there was a group of people that went to Siberia. Now, the Russians, they were notorious that when they would send somebody away, specifically those who they didn't want to come back, they would send them to Siberia. Siberia was this frozen Gehinnom. It was a place that you went to and most people did not return from. Being sent to Siberia was more or less a death sentence. So this group of people were sent to Siberia, and they're there in this frozen jail. Siberia is, these frozen mountains of forests and trees with nothing. And they were made to work day and night. They were given this impossible quota. What do you do in Siberia? They were demanded to cut down 1,000 trees a day, every day. They were handed these little handsaws. And with a little handsaw, they were expected to cut down these large Russian oaks, 1,000 a day, in impossible work, impossible load. And because of that, they had to wake up like that, 4:30, 5 in the morning, and they had to work and work and work and cut and chop and work all day. The time they finished cutting down these 1,000 trees, there was nothing left of them, nothing. They just barely made themselves back to their barracks, and they collapsed until the next morning. There was one particular guy in the group, probably a Jew, who came up with this brilliant idea. He says, we're cutting down these Russian oak with these little handsaws. That's so... I have an idea. This guy was very ingenuitive. He took a few of the little handsaws and he attached the blades, where now you have a much longer and a much more proficient saw. And then he put a handle, a second handle, on the opposite side of the saw. So you had this longer blade with a handle on one side and a handle on the other side. Now it became a two-man saw, lumberjack style. And now what they would do is that there were two guys who would man the saw together. One guy would hold from one end, the other guy would hold from the other end. And they would walk up to this tree in the middle, and they would use each other's strength and each other's inertia to be able to cut down the trees in half the time. It worked so well that, believe it or not, after he put together a few of these nifty two-man saws, they started the next day's workload. They were able to finish the quota of 1,000 trees in less than half the time. Where typically up until this point, it took them almost till 10, 11 o'clock at night from 5 in the morning just to fill the 1,000 tree quota. Now, they were done the entire load with 2-3 hours left before nightfall. They actually went back to their bunks with a little bit of strength. They actually returned to their barracks at a normal hour. They were able to sleep a full night's sleep. They were able to have a little conversation. They were actually able to start to live a drop. Word got back to the head Russian commandant that these people came up with this new nifty little two-man saw, that they're able to do the workload in half the time. And now they're done even before nightfall. The Russian commandant got angry. He comes down to the group and says, from this day on, the quota is no longer 1,000 trees. From this day on, you need to cut 1,500 trees. The guy that invented the two-man saw, he jumps up out of the group and screams, what? You told us 1,000 trees. You told us that that's what you needed. You told us that that was your quota. We delivered to you what you needed. That's not fair. Now that we figured out a better way to do things, where we're not completely wasted at the end of the day, and now you up the quota on us? That's not fair. No way, we're not doing it. The commandant said, excuse me? This is Siberia. He takes the guy and he puts him into solitary confinement. He puts him down underground in one of those cinder block dark rooms, frigid, locks the door. Here's this guy sitting in the solitary confinement. It's pitch black. He's telling to himself, it's not fair, it's not fair, it's not fair. Well, these guys think that's not fair. We did what they wanted. It's not fair. How do they change it on us? Just then, as he's mumbling to himself, he might not see, but he can feel that there's somebody else there in the room with him. Somebody else in chains. So he says, who's there? There's another voice in the darkness. The voice says, I'm a prisoner just like you. He said, really? What are you in for? He says, I was one of the officials in one of the cities. And when it came time to knock out all the officials to take over power, I was one of them. They sent me to Siberia and put me in solitary confinement. He turns to the guy from the group and says, what are you in for? He says, well, I figured out a way to turn those little hand saws into this big, really powerful two-man saw. I figured out a way to turn that 1,000 tree quota, which was impossible to live with, to be done in half the time. And you're not going to believe this. The guy came back and said that now we need to do 1,500 trees. You're not going to believe this. It's not fair. The other guy starts laughing. He says, that's what you're in for? He says, yeah, I complained. I told him this is not fair. You wanted 1,000 trees? We gave you 1,000 trees. We came up with a smart idea to do it in half the time, and you changed the quote on us? 1,500? It's not fair. And the other prisoner is laughing. He says, wait 1 second. Do you think they need the trees? You're in Siberia. Siberia is only trees and ice and snow. They have a whole forest of trees, millions of trees. They don't need your trees. You think that they get you to cut down the trees all day because they need exactly 1,000 trees every single day? What do you think they're doing with the trees? They're not even using the trees that you're cutting down. And if that's the case, buddy, this has nothing to do with the trees. He says, no? He says, no. They don't care about the trees. They just want to make sure that you're busy from very early morning to very late at night, and you don't have a second to think. Because they're worried. The minute that prisoners get a minute or two to converse, to talk, to think, to brainstorm, quickly they're worried. They might be revolting. They might start rebelling. And because of that, you know what they do? They make you work day and night. And your mind is completely overwhelmed. You're so busy, you don't have a minute to think. You don't have a minute to feel. You don't have a minute to talk. You don't have a minute to converse. You don't have a minute to brainstorm. There's no creativity. There's no human thought process. It's a robot that just cuts down trees. That's the way they want to keep you. So that you won't revolt. So that you won't rebel. It's not about the trees, of course. Now that you figured out how to cut down those trees half the time, of course they threw up the ante and now they almost doubled the workload. Because the point is they're trying to keep you busy. They just got to make sure that you don't revolt. Gentlemen, Paro could not care less about the structures of Pitom and Ramses that we were building in Egypt. Just the opposite. Chazal tell us, Pitom v'Ramses. Pitom is Pi Tahom, the mouth of the abyss. That means that it was an area that you couldn't build on. It was a swamp. Ramses is Ramses, which means quicksand. So they got them to build structures on swamps and quicksand. You expect something to stand? Every time they would build a structure, the next morning they'd come back, either it toppled, or it sank, or it just fell apart. And they had to start all over again. And the brilliant Jewish mind, which figured out, did you believe this? The Medrash says that they actually figured out how to do the impossible. How to build structures on swamps. It's like Mr. Reichman. Brilliant Jewish mind. He went to Battery City. He went to the downtown Manhattan. And he figured out that if he dumps the dirt into the river, he's actually filling up space where he can put buildings on land. Battery Park City was once water. It's a Jewish mind. It's brilliant. He found new real estate in Manhattan that never existed. And he built on top of it. These magnificent towers and buildings. He became fantastically wealthy. But he built on Pitom and Ramses. he literally built. Unbelievable what he did. Genius, brilliant. The Jews came up with a plan. The Midrash writes that they were even able to build on Pi Tahom and Ramses, which is quicksand and swamp. What did the Egyptians do? Shh, look at these guys. We made them build on those areas because we just wanted to keep them working day and night without any break, without any moment to breathe. And now they figured out actually how to finish the job. So says the Midrash, from that point on, what did they do? In front of their faces, they inspected the buildings, the towers, and then they would smash it down. They would break it down in front of them. And they would say, okay, start over again and do it again. This is unbelievable. By the way, I just want to mention, many people always ask the question, how come on Pesach, when it comes to maror, we end up, many families have the minhag that for maror they use romaine lettuce. What's so bitter about romaine lettuce? Some families use endives. What's so bitter about endives? Ashkenazim, b'le'ayin hara, they use chrein. They use white chrein. I remember one year my father, Erev Pesach, he was just grinding the root of the chrein. I walked into the house. I didn't even get to the kitchen yet. I walked into the house. This whiff hit me. I was like, wow! Put that stuff away. My eyes were tearing. It was a tear gas. It was tear gas. I only walked through the front door. I couldn't get into the house because he was doing the chrein. God bless my mother. But many families, when it comes to maror, they don't use chrein. They use romaine lettuce. They use endives. They use green type of a leafy, greeny type of a maror. After they check it, of course, many times, but that's what they use. Why would they use that for maror? Did you ever think about that, guys? Why would they use a greeny thing for maror? Is it bitter? It's not so bitter. Romaine lettuce isn't so bitter. Endives isn't so bitter. The answer is because the maror of Egypt wasn't necessarily bitter. It was tasteless. You built something and they knocked it down in front of you. They didn't allow you to taste the fruit of your own work and efforts. And that's maybe more bitter than bitter itself. In order to remember how they made life purposeless, worthless, accomplishless, tasteless, we eat romaine lettuce and endives to remind us that right when we finished building the structures, they broke it down in front of our eyes and told us, now start again. That's the worst bitterness possible. Tasteless, romaine lettuce, endives, maror. What was Paro's plan? It wasn't that he wanted the buildings. It wasn't that he wanted the structures. And he definitely didn't want the cities. He wanted the Jewish mind to be occupied day and night. He wasn't interested in the trees. He just wanted to keep you busy, yomam v'layla, so that when you're done, you're falling off your feet. You don't have a second not to think, not to actually stop and ask, what am I doing? What am I getting into? Why is this happening? What should we do? How do we get out of this? Paro says, as long as you keep them busy, tichbad ha'avoda al ha'nashim. They're thinking about freedom. More avodah. Add work. Make them more busy. Get them to do double time. Like this, they won't be able to think for a moment. Paro, he enslaved our minds before he enslaved our bodies. And this was exactly the plan that Paro was able to take a free people. We were free people. We were actually not just the free people. We had very, very big lineage. We were the children and the family of Yosef HaTzadik, who was the national hero. Could you imagine? Could you imagine somebody who his last name is Washington? Not Denzel, I'm talking about George. George Washington. I'm talking about George Washington. Could you imagine a guy who's family of George Washington, the American first president, the American hero? And his children they take and they enslave. How would that work? National hero. How do you go and enslave a free people? And not just how do you enslave them. How do you slave them without having to put a gun to their head? But it's the opposite. At their own volition, at their own will. The answer is, Paro made us work day and night. The worst workload, the impossible quota, in order to overwhelm our minds that we had absolutely no ability to stop for a minute and think. And therefore we couldn't revolt. And therefore we couldn't rebel. Because we didn't have a minute. We were robots that were running through a workload that was already impossible. We were living life just catching up. Just catch every second, until we dropped. And that was the secret. Keep them so busy so that they can't think. Let them live distracted. So like this, they could never rebel. They can never revolt. It's an amazing thing. It's an amazing thing. Says Paro, I'm going to take their ability to have any hope away by taking their ability away to think. You know, when you're distracted, it's very difficult to think clearly. When you're not really focused, your creativity, your unique abilities of thought, what made great thinkers and great people, came from those moments that they were able to really focus on a situation, on a problem. But Kol Zman they're distracted, even the greatest of minds. Kol Zman they're distracted, they were absolutely unable to really properly think. It's amazing. We're living in a time today where we have a double dose of Paro in our lives. A double dose. You thought that this was an Egyptian saga? You think that this is a story that goes back, a few thousand years ago? Our brains today are completely put on overdrive. We're being so overwhelmed with this rush of a tidal wave of garbage, information of worthlessness that's constantly coming at us. From the moment we open our eyes in the morning till the last second at night when we put our phones to sleep. It's amazing. And maybe it's the phone that puts us to sleep. It's an amazing concept. You know, before we had phones, I'd like to just think this out together for a minute. Before we had these fancy phones, did you ever know anyone who went outside and checked his mailbox 9-10 times a day? Maybe I got mail, maybe I got mail, maybe I got mail. Honey, I'm just running outside to see if I got mail. You just checked about 3 minutes ago. I'm just, in case the mailman was a little bit on the late side today, maybe he came a little later Tuesdays than Wednesdays. I just want to check if maybe today's mail came in a little later. I'm just going out to check. I'll be back in a minute. No big deal. I'll be back in a minute. No big deal. Could you imagine married to a guy like that? Every 10 minutes he runs out of the house and checks the mailbox and comes back in. Runs out of the house, checks the mail, comes back in. Do I have any messages? Do I have any messages? Every 2 minutes checking. Do I have any messages? Do I have any messages? Do I have any messages? Could you imagine? Before we had these phones, we got mail once a day. It was put on the dining room table. Most of those envelopes were bills. The rest was probably junk mail. Once in a blue there was something significant, like a letter from our kid's school or something like that. And that was it. It wasn't a moment-to-moment relationship with the mail. It was a one-time-a-day thing that we didn't really give so much emphasis or time to.
Surprise guest.
And today, what's amazing is, there doesn't go 2-3 minutes without us checking the phone to make sure that either someone didn't email us, someone didn't text us, someone didn't, today with WhatsApp, forget about it. It's constant, it's consistent. And that's just the messaging that goes on between people. What about the breaking news? Remember that once upon a time? How did we catch up with news before the phone? I mean, there was a radio. Yeah, we picked up the paper in the morning. We sat with the paper over a good cup of coffee, caught up with everything that's going on in the world, and then at 9:20 a.m., we were done with news for the day. Unless there was this earth-shattering breaking news, like the president was shot or something, really big, that everyone went crazy over. But outside of that, that was basically our relationship with the news once upon a time. We caught up once a day. And then the next day, we found out what we missed out from the day before. And quickly, over a matter of a few minutes and a good anchor man, we found out what happened in the last 24 hours. It wasn't an obsession. And it definitely wasn't a moment-to-moment overwhelming relationship that we felt committed to. And we felt like we were losing out on something if we're not checking the mail, or we're not checking the messages, or we're not checking the news every 2 minutes. And God forbid we look at the phone and there's that red dot that shows that something wasn't opened yet. We start to get worked up. Oh my God, I got to take care of that. There's something hanging. There's something literally waiting for me to answer to. So quickly I open it up, and it's a bunch of nothing that somebody sent me. But now that I opened it, he sees that I opened it. So now I got to respond. And this process goes on and on and on and on and on. And you walk on the train today, the train to the city. It's an amazing phenomenon. The entire train, all passengers are sitting there looking at their phone. The entire train. And you walk into a doctor's office, into a waiting room, everybody is sitting looking at their phone. And then you go to our kids, because they come home and they sit down at the supper table with mom and dad. How was school today? How was school today? How was school today? Good. That's the extent. You get the good. What's good? Everything's good. These are the answers we get today from our kids. And we tell the kid, could you put down the phone? And he says, yeah, let me just finish this. Let me just finish this. And this goes to that. And even when the phone is put down, it's down for how long? A minute, 2 minutes. Checking. This kid is 16 years old. He has no mortgage. He has no payments. He has no marriage. He has no kids. He has no worries. He has no issues. And he is on the phone 24 hours. Do you know that I once taught in high school, I did a challenge with my class. I had to promise them a world just to try this challenge. But I challenged these guys that one night a week, one night, when they get home, right when they get home, they have to take their phone, go into their bedroom, and put it in a drawer, and close the drawer for an hour. And this is the response I got the next day when they came back to school, telling me what went with this exercise. What happened? And the prevailing amount of kids came back with a similar story. They went into their room. They put their phone in the drawer, closed the drawer. They walked out, looking back. 2 minutes later, they come walking into the room. They stand by the drawer. They walk out. They come 2 minutes later walking into the room. One kid told me he actually opened the drawer just to make sure that the phone is still there. I said, Houdini, what's going to happen to the phone? He says, Rabbi, I just had to make sure it's still there. I had to make sure the baby's still in the cradle. Make sure it's still there. He closes the drawer. I said, but you didn't touch the phone because then you lost the child. No, Rabbi, I didn't touch the phone. I opened the drawer. I just make sure it's still there. That's okay. And what did you do? I closed the drawer and I walked out. He says, 10 minutes later, he comes walking in. He stood by the door and he's looking at his watch. This hour is going too slow. Now, if you think this is funny, I want you to try this. I want you to try this. I want you to see if you could show resistance to your minute-to-minute love relationship that you have with your phone. I want to know if you can do this. It's like we turn to smokers and we say, let's see. I'm not telling you to quit smoking. I just want to know if you're able to quit smoking. Let's see if you can go for a day or two without a lick. Yeah, come on, it's nothing to me. Why, Rabbi, I can do it in a heartbeat. I tried it 20 times. I can do it like nothing. I said, yeah, okay, so let's see. Try it. These kids told me, and these are young kids, 16, 17 years old. They ended up walking in and out of that room over 20 times in that hour in a nervous pace, pacing back and forth, like a father that his wife is in the delivery room waiting for news. They're pacing back and forth. Do you know what we call that in modern English? An addict. It's an addict. Not the attic of your house. That's my Brooklyn accent. It's an addict as an addiction. Addicted to something. It's called slavery. We should rename the phone. It's not the iPhone, it's the iParo. That's what we should name it. We took a free man with a sense of creativity and thought, and we turned him into a little puppy, a slave who follows its master and checks up on the master every minute or two, and without the master, he doesn't see his existence to be worth anything without it. That's slavery. It's amazing. Look what they did to us. If you open up your phone, go to the battery life. Hit battery. I learned something over the years teaching high school. If you take a look and you press on battery, you'll see how many hours that week, different apps, different social media was used by the user in total. So as an example, I turned to one kid in the class and I said, can I borrow your phone for a minute? He said, sure, Rabbi. He walks up and hands me the phone, and while I'm trying to get to his battery to show him what I'm about to tell you now, he's standing literally on top of me. He doesn't go back to his seat. I said, it's okay, go back to your... No, Rabbi, my phone. I said, I promise you I'm going to give you back your phone. He says, I understand, I'm more comfortable standing here. Mejnun. I'm more comfortable. And this kid doesn't sit in the back of the room either. But he needed to stand here. Now, at first I thought maybe he was worried I'd find something on the phone that maybe not proper. But that wasn't the deal, because I told him, just show me where the battery is. I'm only going to look at the battery. I'm not here to look at what you look at. I'm not that type of rabbi. I look to build you on the inside, and you're going to make a better choice in life. I'm not here to be a sledgehammer on the mistakes you did. I'm here to just show you how life can be better if you change it. And he could not walk away from my chair. He hits the battery. He shows it to me. I said, oh my gosh. You spent 27 hours this week on YouTube? 27 hours. You spent 32 hours this week on Netflix? 32 hours. How long did you spend on TikTok? How many hours you are on WhatsApp? How many hours you are on Facebook? Bro, do you sleep? There's not enough hours left in the week. I might not be, the biggest mathematician, but look at these numbers. They're all double-digit numbers. in hours. And they don't stop. And then when I got to Fortnite, forget it. I handed him back his phone. I said, go back. They took us by surprise. It's not about the trees. It's about that I'm going to keep you inundated, focused and busy, absolutely brainwashed, overwhelmed with an enormous information in an addictive sense. Don't you know how the human mind works? The minute the phone clicks on something, it's calling me. I say, oh my gosh, there's something I need to answer. The minute I do it, it sends a certain effect of dopamine in the brain. And there's a certain rush. There's a rush. And that pushes me to go for more. And then the addiction only spirals further. And now I can't let go of the phone. I taught high school. I saw that as long as the phone was in the guy's pocket, he could not learn a piece of Gemara. It was too distracting and he's not even looking at it. It's just that he knows it's here. And it needs me. And I need it. And it's calling me. So my capacity of focus and intellect dropped to only 25%. Because most of my unconscious focus is on my phone, of what might come my way, as long as it's in my pocket. I need to be ready to respond. I'm a first responder to my phone. And the other 25% he gives to the Gemara. How does a boy who never learned Gemara before in his life supposed to pick up the skills only using 25% of his capabilities? It's a new language, it's Aramaic, it's a new concept of thought and analyzation. How are you going to pick that up with only giving 25, a quarter of your brain to the actual subject? So I said, enough is enough. We're going to collect these phones. We're going to collect these phones, I said to myself. We're going to collect them. We're going to give these guys a breath of freedom. Freedom! We're going to get them freedom. So I collected the phones. I had the audacity to collect the phones. They were bugging out. They were bugging out. They were bugging out. I said, guys, relax. I'm giving every single one of your phones valet parking. You're going to see I'm giving you white glove VIP treatment. But you know as well as I know, as long as that phone is in your pocket, there's no way you can learn. So I says, Rabbi, but I want to see my phone. And then when I collected the phone, don't put his phone on top of my phone. Rabbi, careful, careful. That case was expensive. Rabbi, careful, don't scratch my screen. So we collected all the phones. The only way I was able to get these guys to learn, you know the Rebbe's desk? I had to set up valet parking on the Rebbe's desk with these guys' phones so that they can actually every now and then look up and see, okay, my baby is good. My phone is safe. No one's touching it. No one's playing with it. It's still there. And only then they were able to concentrate on the Gemara we were teaching. When the mind is overwhelmed with this enormous amount of information, and it's messaging, and it's videos, and it's TikTok, and it's Facebook, and it's WhatsApp, and the list just goes on and on and on, and there becomes that addictive nature, and suddenly I get attached, and suddenly I get a high from every time that I answer a message, and every time I'm wondering what's going to come through. It comes to a point where I stopped thinking for myself long ago. I am only now reacting but I'm never thinking. Listen to this amazing scientific study that they did not too long ago in one of these high Ivy League colleges. They had a sleep study where they put two groups. Two groups were divided. One were given their cell phone and the other group was not. And then both groups, when they woke up in the morning, group number one would do what they typically do every day of their life. The minute they open their eyes, their reflexive first reach is to their phone. To take a look at their phone and see if, God forbid, they missed anything that might have came through overnight while they were actually allowing themselves some sleep. The other group had no phones. When the other group woke up in the morning, they woke up without a phone, without anything to look at. They actually were coaxed into going, taking breakfast, talking on the table with people, and their phones were only given to them at 10 a.m. in the morning. After a full morning of what you would call typical, normal, productive living. They found an incredible thing. They found that the people that woke up in the morning and looked at their phones right away, as opposed to the people in the morning that didn't get their phones till later on that morning, the people who had no phone to look at as they woke up, that day were much more creative, much more productive, much more original, much more head smart, focused, and successful than the people who woke up right away and looked at their phone and started answering emails in bed from all the things that came in overnight that they never got to the night before. Why is that, guys? I want to ask you guys, let's go back to yeshiva for a minute. Give me a svara. Give me a logic. What's pshat? How would you explain some incredible phenomenon that they proved in a sleep study with two groups, and this went on for 2 weeks. 2 weeks. That means for 2 weeks, the group that did not look at a phone when they woke up right in the morning were incredibly productive, creative, focused for 2 weeks. And the other group was deadheaded for 2 weeks. What's the pshat? And they proved scientifically an amazing phenomenon. Right when a human being, when a person wakes up in the morning, the first thing you do in the morning has a tremendous effect on the mode of your mind for the rest of the day. Now, if you pick up that phone immediately from the first seconds that you open your eyes, and you start going through emails, answering them, WhatsApps, text messages, whatever it might be, answering them, you're already on defense. You're already returning that which was thrown upon you, so to speak, from those first waking moments of your morning. The moment your mind immediately reverts onto defense, the moment your mind immediately reverts onto answering and dealing with whatever already came at you, for the rest of the day you remain in a mode of just simply responding to whatever life throws at you. But the mind never turns over to the proactive side of thinking, to the proactive side of creativity, of brainstorming, of problem solving, because it's on defense. And it remains all day on defense. That's not living. That's responding to what's thrown at you. We have an English word for that. It's called surviving. But the other guy who woke up in the morning and there was no phone to reach, there was no thing thrown at him the moment he opened his eyes that he had to respond to. He opens up his eyes to a white canvas. So much potential. An amazing opportunity of a new day. Modeh ani lefanecha, melech chai v'kayam, shechazarta bi nishmati bechemla, kama, rabba emunatecha. Thank you, Hashem. You gave me an opportunity to go out being great today. And you're going to be the wind under my wings to make me great. I'm going out today to conquer. And I get up and I wash my hands. The Torah is so brilliant. The halakha states that in the morning, before a person davens, he's not allowed to talk to anybody. He's not allowed to do shopping. He's not allowed to take care of his needs. I'm not talking about his bodily needs. I'm saying he's not allowed to take care of business. He's not allowed to do anything before davening. It's so brilliant. Why? We see a new perspective of the genius behind the halakha, behind Torah. Because when you get up in the morning, if you start taking care of things that come at you, you'll be in that mode for the rest of the day. You'll never live. You'll never be the genius unleashed inside of you. Never, never, never. You'll just be the slave of just reacting and surviving to life's change-ups and curveballs. And you go to sleep that night, survived. Survival. As a survivor. But you didn't live not 1 minute that day. Not one moment. But when you get up and you start the day fresh, and you don't talk to anyone in their needs, and you don't answer anyone in their mails, and you don't turn to anyone in their issues, it's you starting with Hashem in the morning, and you do Netilat Yadayim, get off the Tum'ah, that already makes you feel like you can fly, and then you go directly to Shul. Do you know that on the way to Shul there are halachot that govern how to say good morning to someone before you prayed? Some won't even say the name Shalom Aleichem because Shalom is God's name. So they'll say in Aramaic, a good morning, Sapatava, something like that. And then they come to Shul. When you come to Shul, the halakha states, go straight to your seat. You're not allowed to go to the back of the Shul and even say good morning to somebody out of the direction of where you're going to stand in Shul, because you're supposed to go straight to Hashem, to the force and the blessings of your potential for that day. That guy lives. That guy comes into Shul, he's ready to conquer. He comes into his day, he's ready to conquer. And then you're able to couple that with a little bit learning after tefillah, where you get your mind already on the mode of power, where you went through a good Gemara, a good Daf Yomi. You are ready to conquer. You go out there now, you are in total offense. You'll see what this guy does that day. He's not just on defense, answering the world. He is literally dictating the world. It's amazing. Our thought process was meant to be a godly process. Our thought process was meant to be a plan of action. And because of these phones, it became a plan of reaction. All day we're just reacting and reacting and reacting to whatever the shtusim that the phone throws us. And we can't stop. And we're out of control. And we're addicts. I sit in the morning with guys that are learning. The guy that's sitting on the table, learning with me be'ayun. The guy that has a phone, even face down, next to his Gemara. Once upon a time, that guy was asking Rekiva Eger questions. Today, his bar dropped so low that he's just happy that he comes out of the class. Yeah, Rabbi, I got the Gemara. You got the Gemara? That's what your bar became? That's your level of measure of success? I know why. Because 25% is on the Gemara, and the other 75% is on his phone. And as long as it's sitting there as a visual aid, distracting his subconscious mind. Because it represents all the people he's going to meet today, and it represents his wife is going to be calling soon for carpool, and it represents so many things outside of what's going on. His mind is already overwhelmed and he didn't even look at it yet. Wait till he looks at it. And then he's out to lunch. This is the way you enslave a free man. At his own volition, at his own will. And they've done this to us. And we are avadim hayinu b'paro b'mitzrayim today. And it's time to stop the steal. They're stealing every minute from us. 27 hours on YouTube. Come on. We're better than that. 30 hours on TikTok. 25 hours on WhatsApp. Come on. We're better than that. Do you know, I don't know, Stephen Covey has the 7 habits of the most successful. I'm not going to go into, but even the Goyim, I'm talking about the Goyim, even agree that one of the most common, this is Aleph Bet, the most common habit of all successful, wealthy, big-time Goyim in the world, not to bring riots from them, but even they would agree, is that they're up early in the morning. Their morning routine dictates their whole day. They sleep with the phone in the other room. They don't use their phone as an alarm clock. They bought a lousy $12 alarm clock. It's too big of a sacrifice. The minute you look at the phone to see what time it is as an alarm clock, you see the red dots, and suddenly the baby starts crying, and it's calling me, feed me, feed me, feed me. And we can't say no. And then immediately we get put on defense, and we start reacting to what's thrown at us at minute 1 of our day instead of being proactive. A human thought process was meant to be a plan of action, not a plan of reaction. That's what we became today. We've lost our creativity. We've lost our genius, our focus, our prowess. I see it in the learning. I see it in the learning, the difference between the guy that walks into the share with the phone on the table and the guy who doesn't. One guy is just learning defensively, and the other guy's learning offensively. You know the difference? It's huge. Because one guy's head is overwhelmed because he's living distracted. He's learning distracted. And the other guy's on key. It's amazing to me. And if you believe that, you'll understand why when a guy comes into a shul and he sits down to pray, and as long as that phone is in his pocket, with all the classes you heard on Tefillah, and with all the Pirush HaMilim, and with all the Kavanot that you learned over the years, and as long as that phone is either on the table, or under your koracha, or in your back pocket, your mind is not focused. It is so hard to daven. And what about the guy that in middle of Chazara, he's answering emails? What about the guy by Kaveh? He says, it's the end of the tefillah already. So he's answering emails in his talet and tefillin in the middle of the shul. Besides the chutzpah, besides the abomination and the slap in the face to God, it's like those parents that I told you before, that the teenager comes to the dinner table, and he's completely gone. How was it today in school? Good. That's what we're doing to God in shul. Guy's sitting there, was talit and tefillin on. He's sitting there. He tells God, good. Besides the chutzpah, how could you pray? Who are you joking? You can't pray. You can't pray. No, just one more thing. No. I'm going to ask him I'm going to answer in one word. Yes, no, that's it. Because he's waiting for me. He's waiting for me. He's waiting for me. There's no way to pray with your phone on you. And we are so attached to this sickness, and we're so enslaved that we don't want to even hear about the resistance. Because everybody knows that the only way to deal with an addiction, the first step to cure an addict, is to admit that there's an addiction. To admit that we're addicted. That's the first step. And then to start the resistance. To be able to go to sleep at night with the phone in the other room. So that the next morning I could wake up with the genius inside of me. Instead of being on defense and reacting to the world all day, I can go out there and make the world be proactive. I can come to shul and I can get rid of the phone so I can daven. So maybe my tefillot will start to be answered. Hashem, listen to me guys, Hashem is not going to play second fiddle to anybody. He's not. Hashem is not going to be your second wife. He's not. You walk in with a phone, Hashem says, your mind is on that, it's not on me. I'm not able to hear your tefillah. I don't play second fiddle. It's Hashem Echad. He is one, but not just He's one. He's the only one. He's the only one. He demands to be the only one in your life. And if your mind is completely on the garbage that's coming in, or the phone that's nagging, Hashem says, where's your tefillah going? What tefillah? Shut the phone off before you walk into shul. Put it in the locker. I know for some people that's just too difficult. But what does that say about you when you can't separate from your device for 40 minutes of a shachrit? What does that say? That says you gave up the house. You're no free man. You're a slave to a master. And you just can't cut the umbilical cord. And that's a scary feeling. We walk around like Americans. Freedom! The land of the free, the home of the brave. Bro, you're in Egypt. You're building towers on quicksand. Going nowhere. You're not living, you're surviving. You're not thinking, you're reacting. Put away the phone. Give yourself a chance to actually bring your mind, your heart, back to Borei Olam. Because as long as it's sitting on that table, even if it's face down, as long as it's in your back pocket, your mind is not here. And if you don't believe me, ask your wife. She'll tell you how many times she spoke to her husband and his head was on something that's supposed to be coming in any minute. And she asked him 4 times. And he says, I know. She said, what do you know? You don't even hear what I said. I know. I'll pick the kid up in 5 minutes. Pick the kid up in 5 minutes. He's already home from school an hour ago. Ask your wife. She'll tell you. As long as that thing is around, my husband is out to lunch. You think Hashem doesn't feel the same way about your tefillah? As long as that thing is around, this guy, his tefillot, out to lunch. His lips go, da, 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 and Hashem says, don't do me any favors. I want your heart. Tefillah is avodat halev. Avodah shebalev. There's no lev here. The guy sits down to learn. For those few minutes, put it away. Shut it off. Shut it down. And like this, we can finally unleash that certain genius inside of us. It's time to stop the steal. We're being robbed of our time. I told you, even the Goyim, the wealthiest, the most successful. What was the common denominator that he told us, Stavikovi? What did he tell us? That they all are early risers. You know why? Because they realized that their success has to do with finding time, not burning it. And they realized these guys are workaholics, no question. Even with the billions they have, they can't stop working. But they realized that if they could find a few more hours to work, they'll be that much more successful. They're looking for time. So instead of waking up at 8, 9 o'clock in the morning, they're waking up at 5 because now I have a productive hours of time. Their whole day starts and is built on those early hours. It's time that's clear. Your mind is clear. You can think. You can bring out the genius. I sit with a calendar. I sit with a calendar. Right after I come back from the learning, I make a calendar of what I'd like to accomplish that day. I put it down on a calendar. And as the day goes on, I try to accomplish, check off whatever it is I was able to do and what I'm not able to do. I have this huge calendar with those big, huge boxes for every day. To me, a day is a big box, not a tiny little thing that you got on your phone. There's a lot of potential here. Let's go out and do something with it. You wake up at 5 in the morning. You wash your hands. You make yourself a good coffee. You sit down. You learn a Blat Gemara. You start by me. I have to prepare my shiurim. So you prepare the classes. You come to shul at 7. You daven like a mensch. There's nothing gnawing at you. You take the phone. You shut it off. Even now in the class it's off. I wouldn't be able to talk to you if this thing was buzzing at me and buzzing at me. Do you know how many hours I got when I switched to this phone? Do you know how many hours I found even after I switched to this phone? You know how many hours I found after that when I stopped my texting? Now, if you want to talk to me, you got to talk to me. And if anyone out there wants to talk to me, they need to talk to me. Good luck trying to get through to me, but you got to talk to me. I found so many hours. Hours I never had in the day. When you come into shul, shut down the phone, talk to God. You'll say that your tefillah will start getting answered. You'll be proactive. You'll be on the offense. You can't pray on defense. Good luck trying to pray daven Hashem while you're in defensive mode. Doesn't go. And more than anything, set aside time to resist. Put the phone, do that challenge, put it in a drawer for an hour a day. See if you can stand it. See if you're not finding yourself pacing back and forth, waiting for that hour to end. Start the resistance little by little by little. But most of all, remember, Rabbi, I need the phone in order to get so much work done. This phone today, I can do my work in half the time. They don't want the trees. They don't care how much work you can get done with that phone. I am waiting for one person on this planet to walk up to Duvi Ben Shushan and say, "Shh, with this phone, I was able to cut my workload in half the time. Now I come home every day at 2 in the afternoon. You show me that one guy that's coming home early because the phone is so effective and efficient that I can work so much quicker with it. Show me one guy, please, just one. I'm not asking for much. One human being that's coming home early because he has no work left because the phone allowed him to work so much faster. Show me that guy." And they still think it's about the work. That's why they martyr themselves, these phones. Because without the phone, I can't live because my whole business, Rabbi, is on this phone. You know how many times I heard that? My whole business is on this phone. And I try to explain to him, I understand. I understand what this phone can produce. But don't you get it? The reason why you have it is not because of the trees. It's because they need to keep you busy day and night without a moment to think so that you could remain a slave. And all we do is react. And we lost our ability to become great. So tomorrow morning, you come into shul. If you're not ready to put it in the locker, shut off your phone. Tomorrow morning, when you wake up, put the phone in the other room tonight. Tell me if there's going to be a difference in tomorrow. One morning, wake up without your phone in the room. One morning, wake up. Do Netilat Yadayim. Go to shul. Daven, without looking at your phone. Tell me if your tefillah is a different tefillah. Because the phone's still off from the night before. Don't turn it on yet. I promise you nothing's going to happen. I promise you no one's dying. Everything's going to be okay. And then after you learned a little something after Shachrit, turn the phone on. But tell me how liberating. Tell me the clarity. Tell me the creative genius that you found when you found yourself that morning, before you turned on the world of distractions and went back into the shackles of slavery. It's time to stop the steal. Thank you for listening, guys.